Hi.
Oh, hi. How are you? I'm so excited to meet you in person because we've talked on the phone many times and we've LinkedIn
Yeah,
and emailed. So it's so nice to meet you in person and get to chat about CLM and readiness and all the goods. Are you excited to
I
be
love
here?
it. So excited. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yay.
Thank you for creating my new favorite podcast. I
Oh
love all of it.
gosh, I love it too.
So
I'm
this is
so
the
excited
best.
that you reached out to me. So normally I have
Mhm.
I've got folks on the podcast that I've known for a long time because I've been in the industry for a long time, and you and
Mhm.
I have just met a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Just because you're in the space and you sort of found me on LinkedIn. Thank you, LinkedIn. I
Mhm.
love LinkedIn for all the connections that it makes. And so we're just getting to know each other. And I'm really excited to have you on and talk about your background and some of the topics that you and
Yeah,
I have
thanks.
discussed offline. So
Mhm.
let's get started. We can talk a little bit about your background. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the CLM RX community. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah.
Welcome. And thank you so much for reaching out. I'm
Thank
so excited
you.
you're here.
Oh, thank you. And shout out to Sarah Weiss who told me that I should reach out to you. She is a gem. She's a dream.
Oh, I love Sarah.
And
She's the best.
I love being connected with you. It's been so much fun. Even in the last few weeks. So my name is Lily Schurra. I have been in the legal ops, legal tech space probably for like 4 years now
Mhm.
or so. So my background, I am an attorney in the US. I started out in private practice. I moved in house, kind of did everything contracts related, starting with,
Mhm.
insurance contracts and then moving into commercial contracts, direct sales order forms, licensing, strategic alliance partner agreements, all sorts of good stuff.
Yeah.
And my legal ops, legal tech fascination and experience really started with a boss of mine that I had when I was at Dun& and Bradstreet. Shout out to Bob Konopka, one of my favorite humans in history, who was just like, look, I like cool things and ideas and efficiency and just run with it. We are not as efficient as we could be. So like, let's figure this out together and let's kind of dream up the possibilities for this global legal team. And
Yeah,
so
that's
that's what we
awesome.
did. Like it was so, as I sound so nerdy and I fully acknowledge that, but but
No,
I
let's
am
nerd
nerdy.
out. That's what we're here for.
No, it's amazing. So, we got to just kind of explore and build a legal operations function, and take each of the subgroups of this global legal team to the next level, really. Like, we
Yeah.
got to start it with what's our current state? How do we improve that a little bit? How do we make it even better with tech? And by the time
So
I
when
left that company, oh,
you
sorry, go
had
ahead.
it, I was just going to say, so where did you start when you were there and you had
Um,
this great boss that said, take it and run? Like
yeah.
what was the state of the union when you started there?
So we started with CLM Readiness, quite frankly,
Hmm.
because we were in a position where like there wasn't even a contract repository, um, and it's just not by virtue of people not trying, but I think there was just a process where sales would go through the process of requesting a contract, working through negotiations. A lawyer might save something here, sales might save something there, and then you don't even realize what you don't have until you need it,
Right.
right?
Right.
Which
Right.
sucks and is
So
messy.
bad. I think you and
Yeah,
I
and it's
talked about this a little bit before. It's like,
yeah,
how do you find something? I mean, my first experience with sort of, we share war stories a lot. And my first
yeah,
experience was failing an audit in the corporate world because I couldn't find all the pieces of paper that had to go
right.
along with, the process that we defined for Sarbanes-Oxley. And so that was my
Mhm.
initial like moment of I don't want to do this ever again. I want to be able to find the data
Yeah,
easily. So what was your moment?
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think luckily I was able to kind of jump onto the moments that Bob had for he was already starting to think about this. He was already kind of going through an RFP process with a number of different
Hmm.
CLM providers. And I came in at what I think was just the perfect time that, I got to see these different demos and be involved in these conversations and just say like, okay, what does our team need and how do we get there? And we had this amazing member of the team who had started us out on a SharePoint and just said like, here, let's build out a SharePoint. Let's
Hmm.
get our contracts in one place. Let's find them. So we did a process of just like looking for things, which took a long time in and of itself. But even that, to then be able to add in like columns of information in SharePoint, like the level of advancement that took us as a legal team, too, was just incredible.
Yeah.
And
It's
then
almost
then
like
to start
it's
with a
like a little
CLM.
mystery, right? It's like a little
It is.
mystery that you're solving. Where is the
Yeah.
addendum to this agreement? Yeah,
Right.
it's
Oh my
like
gosh.
scavenger hunt.
Literally like feeling my trauma because you go into you go into a SharePoint folder and it's like, okay, I see that there are 17 amendments. Why do I not see number 13? Like, who has
Oh,
it? Where is
right.
it? What does it
The pit
say?
of your
And it
stomach just
right. It could say we've extended for another year, or it could have completely changed some really critical information. So
right.
it's just super stressful. But yeah, we started there because I think contracts are a great place where you can start. It shows immediate value for an organization to say, like, this is how much we're spending, this is how much we're receiving, these are the riskiest terms in these contracts and what we can do about them.
Right.
And then even the information of like, this is what our team spends the most time on, and how we can improve that. All of the data you're able to pull for various ways on the contracts team, given their closeness to anything financial for an organization, is just amazing, right? So we got
Yeah.
to really take that pretty far, and quite frankly, as you know, like CLM projects can take forever. So
It's a
certainly spent a
journey.
few years in that. It's a journey. It
Yeah,
is. Such a rewarding one when things start to
it
work
is.
out, though, when you see it moving forward. So I mean, I could talk about that experience all day, but that was the starting point that was really cool for me to see ways of improving the efficiency of the contracts team. And then we expanded it to like the litigation team. How do we track and monitor
Yes.
complaints? How do we add in a compliance approval workflow to our
Mm-hmm.
contract workflows we're building? How do we improve the efficiency of the M&A analysis and due diligence processes?
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
then I got
great. Like,
to
that's great.
Amazing. No, and I'm sorry to
Yeah.
cut you off. I get so excited. Like,
No,
as
no,
a
no.
person, I'm just
I'm
like,
excited too.
human
We're just like,
exclamation point.
it's so exciting. Well,
It
so
is.
we're, you and I initially kind of talked about readiness, your
Yep.
journey, your own career journey, and we'll talk
Hmm.
some more about, post
Sure.
Dun Bradstreet. But so the thing that I get excited about is what you just mentioned is you start with the readiness piece, right? And it's
Hmm.
so enlightening to see finally all the
Amazing.
information that you can get your hands on. And then what you just touched on is where do you go from there, which is maturity.
Right.
And that is another favorite topic of mine because once you
Love.
have just the basics, there's so many ways you can go. And that's why I say CLM is a journey because there's
Hmm.
so many ways you can automate. There's so many things you can identify. There's so many ways then you can identify to be proactive. And so it's really exciting. Right.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Oh,
we could geek
thrilling.
out on all the ways that CLM can be amazing.
Yeah.
Readiness being step one. So you got to have this sort of aha moment of
Hmm.
contracting and CLM there with this great boss that said, run with it. Did you guys
Yep.
get a full CLM stood up and then start to work on, you said adding more departments? Like, how did that go for you there?
Hmm.
And then where did you go next?
Sure. Yeah. So some interesting kind of internal reasons why we ended up switching to a different CLM provider, kind of like midway through building out the CLM process. So I ended up doing like two CLM projects with Dun and Bradstreet, which ended up being really great experience. And at the time, Lily of the past was not thrilled, but
Right. Yeah.
looking back, very happy to see, because you can learn from it, right? That was my first CLM project, and I could be able to say, for the first one, as we go into the second one, all right, well, here's the stuff that, when we were thinking about what metadata we want to collect from our
Yeah.
contracts, for example, like we weren't really thinking about XYZ things. And I think when you mentioned the aha moment, we had a CEO who was like extremely inquisitive and very open to just connecting with the legal team. And so
Hmm.
he would come over to our like pseudo legal ops department on a regular basis and just be like, hey, how many contracts do we have that have termination for convenience for the customer? Or like, how many contracts do we have that are over, X million dollars, whatever? And that's not something we could have answered, right?
Yeah.
Even just with our SharePoint. So, um, as we were building each of these out, to be able to think through these questions and understand why he was asking them and what
Yeah.
information would be valuable to the business made the
Hmm.
second time around like so much more efficient and valuable from a data collection standpoint.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I've worked on a lot of I've called them rip and replace engagements where we're taking out one CLM and we're replacing it
Hmm.
with another, and those are painful experiences to go through, right?
Yeah.
Painful. Yeah.
No,
So,
and
so
it's
what did
funny
you
because
what kind of go ahead. I was gonna say what kind of stuff did
oh,
you
I was
learn,
just
but
gonna
go
say,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. I was going to say, I think, what's funny is I distinctly remember we had this unbelievable project manager at Dun& and Bradstreet. Name's Katerina. I'm also going to give a shout out to her because she's incredible. And we got to a point where we went live with something in the first
Mhm.
CLM we were working on. And she brought us these little like upside down bund cakes. They were delicious. We were sitting together at a table
That's great.
celebrating this moment
Mhm.
when the head of procurement at the time walked over and was like, "Hey, guess what? I just signed a deal for us to switch over to a different CLM." Like the timing was so hilarious.
No.
And
That's
I still
great.
I still tease him about that because I was like, "Mark, we had cake, we had balloons, we were so excited and you just ripped it away."
That was a rip and replace for certain.
Definitely, definitely.
So in
Um
the second go around, did you go live
yeah.
with the same set that you'd went in the first one, or did you expand? Sort of how did you
Yeah.
approach that?
Sure. So, interestingly enough, and I'm sure you've seen this with a lot of large organizations have a tendency to have a few different, at least a few different tools kind of in their active use.
Yes.
And so sometimes that ends up being like different tools that they use for the same kinds of purposes. Like procurement
Hmm.
might use one contract management process, legal might use another, finance might use another for different information, right? And so one that was already in use for our order form review analysis, like connecting to Salesforce, all of that, one that we already had in use, we just decided to expand that use and
Nice.
increase the things we were doing within it. So we were already live in so many respects. So it made it all the more easier for us to be able to kind of jump in and add more information, more metadata, create contract templates. So that was really rewarding because I think we saw quite a bit of momentum from that already,
Hmm.
just by virtue of the fact that our team was already using so much of it.
How long did it take you to switch? Do you
I
remember
think
what the
honestly, there are parts. I was going to say there are parts of it that are still switching, if I'm being honest, right? Um,
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
but we
I thought you
saw
were
the
going to
ability
say
to
you
like
blocked it out.
parts of it for sure. But I mean, there were things we went live with within a few months to be able to say like we've got these contracts in there. We're starting
Yeah.
to make sure the data is updated in this way. And fortunately, because of all of the data we were able to capture and migrate into the original CLM, we were able to then put that information and easily migrate it into the second one. So
Nice.
um, yeah, I felt like you feel more seasoned in your second CLM project, even if
It
it's with the
only
same company.
I was gonna say it only takes one. I work with a
Hmm.
lot of PMs and BAs in the industry that are, coming, they want to transition into CLM. And one of the things I
Hmm.
say is if you can go from the beginning of collecting requirements all the way through a go
Hmm.
live, you will learn more than you ever thought possible about CLM
Yeah,
implementation and process
absolutely.
design, like all of it. It's such an experience to go through that you can call yourself seasoned at number 2, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's such a fascinating process, but I mean that because it was so much it took so much time and effort and analysis and so many meetings and conversations, like I was so deeply in the weeds with this
Hmm.
that, we started to work on all these other projects kind of on the side, just thinking like, all right, we realize second go around, this is taking a while, right? So how do we
Yeah.
improve our records hold process, our complaint tracking and management process? And one of the things that, again, I'm going to turn into a human exclamation point, like, I don't believe when someone says like, "Oh, that's something," I don't know. When people say like that's not in your wheelhouse or like,
Right.
"Oh, just have somebody else do that for you." So we
Hmm.
really wanted to have dashboards of information. And so people were just like, "Oh, just go like to the IT team and have them build something." And then of course they have all these projects and are too busy.
Right.
Not that they're not
Right.
helpful or anything, but just like you have to get in line. And so I thought like there has to be something I can teach myself here. So
Hmm.
I was able to teach myself how to use Microsoft Power BI, which I was so excited about
That's
because I have no
awesome.
training in that whatsoever. And so and then Bob, my amazing boss, he was teaching himself as well. So we would just kind of like show each other the cool things we could do. And by the end of that process, we were able to put together a dashboard overview of the legal team and give it to the GC and report to him on a regular basis and say, this is what the legal team is doing. We have this much more work than we did this many months ago, and turn it into like pretty useful information.
Yeah.
um And I say pretty, like beautiful, like it's a nice design. I was so proud of it. And then to be able to take that information and use it for the M&A automation that we did too. So like
Oh,
when the business team
nice.
was deciding what, whether to move forward, we could say, here's this like snapshot of the data we were able to pull from the contracts we're doing due diligence on. It was just awesome and so rewarding, and just
That is
things
rewarding.
like
I
that.
love that. Yeah, I love that. And
Yeah, I
then
mean, they just the possibilities that you become aware of as you really get into the weeds on this stuff, just I don't know. I feel like once you start, you can't stop.
I know,
You
right?
can't really
That's why
slow
I'm
down.
addicted to it. So a couple things
Exactly.
that you mentioned that stood out to me just now were
Hmm.
having sort of a partner in crime on your
Yeah.
team that is invested as you are, and you can try things out and play
Hmm.
with the system, and that wants to roll their sleeves up and learn. That
Yeah.
is so helpful, that so that you're not the only one, and that you have another like
Oh, absolutely.
lens, right? Someone else's view and
Hmm.
feedback. And so having a team, that's important during the implementation and just to get ready, right? To
Yeah.
understand the various needs of the organization. So I wanted to call that
Yeah.
out because I think that's super important. And then I
Oh,
also
it's
think
so
it's
powerful.
important, something that you mentioned is being able to show either a steer co or like
Hmm.
the team that you've spoken to about collecting requirements, to show them little snippets along the way, like the dashboard you mentioned,
Oh
to
yeah.
say, hey, look, because that is a part of change management that a lot of people don't think about, is getting folks excited for what you've been
Yeah.
doing. So not only does it feel good for you, the builder, but it feels good
Yep.
for you to show your organization what you've accomplished. And then it also gets them excited. So they're wanting it, right? So those are all really important
Absolutely.
components, I think, of the CLM implementation, is having a team, and then
Yep.
having, those touch points where you can show progress to your stakeholders. I think those things are key.
Absolutely. I think visualizations are so powerful because I mean, like
Yes.
myself, I always say I'm a visual learner. Like the more I can
Hmm.
see, the better I can understand. And you can talk all day long to someone and say like data will make you so much more efficient and think of all the cool things you
Right.
can do. But until you show them, like
Yes.
it's just not going to have the same impact.
I agree
So
with
just
you.
even
And
to see people using the dashboards I created was so cool.
yes,
I
I
love
agree
that.
with you. And I can't tell you, I mean, my experience on the opposite side of that is not showing, where like an organization has chosen not to show their stakeholders until like training or right before go
Hmm.
live. And then stakeholders are like, what is this? And
Yeah.
why do I have to click
Right.
9 million times? And then you're like,
Hmm.
oh no, that's the worst feeling. And so I encourage folks to show early, often, many, many times,
Yep.
get feedback, right? Because you don't want that situation where your entire team is like, this is ridiculous and I don't want to do it. Or, whatever the case is. Like you
Right.
you have to get that feedback loop happening early, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, and to your point about feedback, like to be able to say have the important stakeholders say things like, it would really be more helpful to me if this said X, or if I could
Exactly.
click this button and see that. Like because you can't, as one person or even a team of people, you can't imagine everything that people might need. And I mean, you obviously have
Mm-mm.
to take things with a grain of salt. You can't fix everybody's problems all the time. Like not every technology solution is going to do everything for you, but it really does help go a long way if you could get the feedback of the users before you try to implement the change management, for sure.
Agree. You mentioned something that's important, is you can't solve for every case. And I see sometimes
Yeah.
organizations get stuck in the what if, or they get stuck in
Hmm.
the edge case. It's got to solve for this edge case that happens 2 times a year, and like that's not where your time should be spent focusing. You should be
Right.
focusing on the majority of the use cases, and we understand that edge cases will happen, but I think that's important to set those sort of expectations with the people you're giving visibility
Hmm.
into and asking for feedback. Is
Yeah.
we're solving for this. Be very clear, like we're solving for this. We're not
Yeah,
solving for
exactly.
this thing way out here. And we're not going to change the button labels for this one time that this happens once a year. Like those kinds of things are important to be
Yep.
able to communicate to your team. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I know. I absolutely
Yeah.
agree. I just think
So,
it's interesting across the board. I was going to say, I think one of I can't remember which episode it was of CLMRX actually, where you're talking about niches, like do one thing really, really well and then
mhm,
expand from there. And that's
yeah.
exactly what I try to say, whether I'm in legal ops or now I'm consulting for legal tech companies. And I try to say, like, I get it. There's so much out there that everybody's like, flashy this, flashy that, do this, do that. and
Yeah.
it's all great, and you should definitely be thinking toward the future, but until you are certain that you have solved for something powerful and that you have a unique opportunity to provide that solution in the way that you do, then don't try to expand and do everything else. Like, don't try to boil the ocean.
Boiling the ocean is a big no-no.
Yeah,
I tell my
exactly.
customers that all
Exactly.
the time, my clients that all the time. So we wound around sort of what you were able to accomplish with your first two implementations at Dun Bradstreet. Where did your
Yep.
career take you after that?
Yeah, thanks. And I'm sorry we've somehow spent so much time on my career. It's really like fun to
No,
talk
it's
about it because I didn't.
perfect. It's
Yeah,
how
no, thanks.
yeah, there it's always a windy road, right? And it's
Yeah, it is.
always if you spent any time in this space, you learn in every
Mhm.
single role you have. So I always think people's
Absolutely.
journey through CLM is important. So what was the next step
Yeah.
after Dun Bradstreet?
Yeah. So after Dun& Bradstreet, I took an opportunity at a startup called SourceGraph.
Mhm,
I was their third hire, I think, on the legal team.
mhm,
And I came in because I'm an attorney myself. I came in to do commercial contracting, but also to kind of take my legal operations experience and help them do the right kind of things early on.
mhm.
And that took some unique kind of very manual approaches. I think it has to be manual if you're not using tech, right? Like, how do we
Right.
get ready?
Mhm.
Topic of the episode. How do
Yeah.
we get ready to get into a place where when we need to use the tech, we can feel like we're ready to move forward with that? So, um, things like establishing a contract review process for the business to follow. Like, how do contracts come into the business? How do we save them? What should they say? Like, what information should we be sharing with each other?
Mhm,
um, Establishing something like that to help make sure the team felt really comfortable and confident with the process and how to use it.
mhm.
But I think the
Yep.
most fun thing for me, outside of all the, I probably tried to boil the ocean here with all the projects I wanted to take on. But one of them was really to take the, like, how do you go from a one person legal team to eventually scaling much larger? Even three
Yeah.
people, you've got three different opinions, three different types of ways of doing things.
Right.
Um, so like the manual playbook that the general counsel used for negotiating commercial contracts, her way was different than my way or the other attorney's way. So we were just kind of in this position where how do we take this and structure it in a way that's really user friendly for anybody
Mhm.
who comes into it.
Yeah.
And we can link to different negotiated templates. You can see like why you try to use these backup pieces of information. So I think it was really cool to see that help very quickly as
Mhm,
negotiation. Like the way that the project worked, as I was working through that, we got closer and closer to an end of a quarter. So obviously things are picking up at that time.
mhm,
So just to be able to see kind of ease of use and implement that more effectively, and implement it right away and see value was really cool. And the ability to collaborate in a tool like, Google Sheets, I think is where we put it, or Google Docs.
mhm.
Google Docs it was. Just to be able to say like, hey, this is what I did here, or let's add in this negotiation because it's really powerful in XYZ ways to explain our thought
Yeah.
processes. That way of standardizing a negotiation approach, even in a small team, helps as you scale and helps as you get to, a CLM with a negotiation tool later.
Yeah, I totally agree. Two of the things you touched on that I think are important for readiness are documenting the process. I talk about
Hmm.
that in my book. You have to document it, and it doesn't have to be in a beautiful like Visio chart or Lucid chart. If you can just write
Right.
down like just be basic, write the steps down. It come
Hmm.
the contract intake form comes in this way. Just like you said, where is it coming from?
Yep.
Where are we sharing it? Where are we saving it? Like document that process because it's helpful when you're trying to design your
Yeah.
solution. So that's a good first step. And then the other one is the playbook. I talk to so many customers and clients that don't have playbooks, or that's like a
Hmm.
dream of theirs that they never got time to tackle. And I think it's really important to start a playbook up front. Again, it doesn't have to be a fancy thing. It can even just be, like you
Right.
said, a Google sheet that has various clause positions that are okay. You
Hmm.
can start here. And then if they come back with this language, then you can go here and then you can go here. Like it gives
Right.
you autonomy and empowerment to be able to negotiate that contract on your own. If you have that
Absolutely.
established before you jump to the tech, you can feed that into your clause template and your clause library, and then the system can automate that for you, which is like mind-blowing, right? That's the
Yeah.
so amazing to get to that point. But it does take
Absolutely.
some work, right? So if you can take that, if you can start with a playbook, even you know, rudimentary by just putting down your first, second, and third
Mhm.
positions, you're ahead of the game, right?
Oh, 100%. And
Yeah.
from the CLM provider standpoint, to have a customer who has process already in place, has
Yeah.
something already in place is like a dream, a
It's a
dream.
dream, and it
Yeah,
it it shortens the requirements gathering phase of the
absolutely.
implementation, because for all of you customers that are considering CLM implementations out there, the biggest, longest part of the project can be defining requirements. And that's because
Yeah.
as practitioners, we're walking you through your process. We want to look at your contract templates. And so, as much as you can sort of clean those up or have those things ready, it
Mhm.
shortens the requirements gathering phase. And then you can move into the build phase a lot sooner, right? So,
Yeah,
doing these readiness
absolutely.
steps not only can save you time, they can save you money when you're engaging a CLM implementation partner, because you're not spending so much time having to go through that collection of data with
Right.
your partner, right? You've already got it done internally.
Yeah, and you're not, paying for additional professional services because like,
Right.
if you come into a CLM project and you say, I don't even know where most of my contracts are. I don't have a playbook. I don't have any of this. Right? That's their, standard implementation timeline is out the window. It's going to
Right.
take a much much longer.
Yeah.
And from a change management perspective, it's a lot easier to get your team on board with a new system if you're able to say like, remember that playbook you used in Google Sheets? Like it's
Yeah.
here. It's in the system. Everything you're
It's here.
familiar with. You just press a couple buttons instead of, control effing
Right?
to find things. Yeah.
Right.
S-
Exactly. So you had success. You'd gone
mhm.
through this sort of twice in your first
Yep.
role, and then you're moving into
Mhm.
the startup, and you have a small team, and you're figuring
Mhm.
out how you negotiate and work together. You've got your playbook, you've got your process.
Yep.
Then what? Where did you move to
Yes.
next?
Yeah. So I moved to Contract Pod AI
Mhm.
actually. So obviously a CLM provider. I was their director of legal engineering.
Mhm.
And that was just like a super cool role. I think the startup world is so exciting for me in so many
Yeah.
ways.
It's fun.
It's just because like I just like to be scrappy and like hands-on. So you get
Right.
to do so many things. So
Mhm.
my main job was to be the leader of this legal engineering team. So I had a team of around 13
Mhm.
lawyers situated all around the world, incredible human beings, brilliant, so helpful that, because of their legal background, they were able to meet with the individual customers, understand their use case, understand why they needed the system to work in XYZ ways that they said, and really like build out their implementation in a way that was going to serve them most effectively. So that was amazing to get to work with the team in that way and to get to be so hands-on with the customers.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
obviously, like I know their pain. I have been commercial counsel. I know what you're trying to accomplish. So,
Mhm.
I think people really responded to that, really resonated with a
Yeah.
lot of people. And I love just getting to meet with the customers and talk them through how Contract Pod AI's solution could be valuable to them and
Yeah.
improve their, day to day. But in
Yeah.
addition, like thinking about the scrappiness and like involvement and everything. So I was on the product team. I got to be like a legal expert for the product team, talk about product roadmap, product development, ways in which the customers needed to see like certain improvements in the product to help make
Sure.
their experience even better. And then work directly with like the marketing team who are also unbelievable. And just how do you communicate with this legal persona?
Yeah.
How do you help them understand the value that we bring? So a super cool opportunity to work with really great people.
I think that's important to consider personas, right? Because we
Yeah.
oftentimes just think, well, it's the legal team or it's the GC or
Right.
we think from that perspective. But in my career, I've talked to multiple different personas, right? I've talked to the
Hmm.
IT team where they've got a certain number of contracts, and the HR team, and they contract differently, and the sales team. And it's not just about legal holding, being the owner of the contract. We
Right.
all own it if we're negotiating it, if we're buying or selling something. And so it's
Yeah.
and there's a different way of interacting with the system depending on which persona you are. And so I think that gets
Hmm.
lost sometimes because we're in CLM and it's legal and legal ops, but it's not just
Right.
that. It's an entire organization that's impacted by contracting, and we have to consider that in all
Yeah.
aspects of design, right?
No, absolutely. And I think it has a real Like it shows real importance, and it really helps like resonate with the individual people working at the CLM provider when you're talking about the different personas, or when you see it come into play when you're in a conversation with them. So, for example, I remember one conversation we had where one of the attorneys from the customer was just saying like, look, I don't care what the limitation of liability clause says. Like, I don't need, he's like, I mean, I do, but like, I don't need to see it on my pretty screen in front of me. If I need to look at it, I'll go find it, but I'm not
Right.
on a daily basis. Like, I wonder what every limitation of liability clause says.
Right. And then the
Um,
sales team is like, I don't care about the limitation of liability clause. I just want the commercial
right.
terms to be taken care of, and let's move this contract along, legal
Exactly.
team. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, like, if you think about, if you're setting up your contract record and you're setting the number of different pieces of metadata that are going to be there, whether it's based on what's in your order form or whatever, it may say like 15, we're going to put 15 different pieces of metadata on there, but you need to talk to your different personas who are going to use it on a regular basis because,
Yes.
like, you could try to guess, but what's helpful to one team may not be helpful to another. And that second team may be the one who needs it more than the first.
Right.
So,
Agree.
um, yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm talking in circles. I could talk about this all day, but it was so
It's
fascinating.
it is fascinating. And so I know some of the folks at Contract Pod AI. I used to
Mhm.
work with Ed Chick at IBM Tourist.
Okay.
So he and I've
Mhm.
worked together before in the CLM space.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, great team over there. And I
Mhm.
I I love that you had a team that you were working with that was all different around the world, different perspectives, different ways of contracting,
Yeah.
because not only is persona important, geography
Mhm.
is important, right? Because you've got
Yeah, it is.
GDPR concerns, you've got so many different things in the EU and various different areas where they have different regulations, and even
Mhm.
language in a contract. I mean, I'm not just talking about pretty writing. I'm talking about
Mhm.
Japanese or uh, any of the different languages that you might have to translate the agreement into. Like, those are
Yeah.
considerations you have to think about. And so it's nice to hear that you had that representation, right? You could think
Yeah,
about those
absolutely.
things. Yeah.
I thought it was incredible, and from my perspective, like as a manager, to be able to have regular trainings with my team and say, okay, when you have a customer in the US, these are some of the questions you need to ask and some
Hmm.
of the things you need to consider. Or if your customers in the EU or the UK, you need to consider these things. In India, Australia, all these different
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
geographies. I almost said geographies. Um, it's really important because,
Yeah.
like, you're absolutely right. Things from the legal standpoint, obviously, they're different, but it just kind of depends. There are different considerations across the board, whether it's geography or persona or business or industry. All important things to pay attention to. But I think it all comes down to, like, as a provider, being careful not to try to guess what your customer needs and really just try
Right.
to understand them and their use case really, really carefully.
Yeah. Use cases are so important. They're like the bread and butter of
Yeah.
any design session, any product management
Yeah.
roadmap. Like it's gold for
Yeah.
CLM providers to understand use cases in the market. And
Absolutely.
and I mean, I just can't say enough about how important that is. So customers, provide your feedback to your CLM vendor through your
Mhm.
CSM, your customer success manager, or through your
Right.
implementation partner. Like, let them know, because they do take that feedback really seriously, and it can
Oh,
become part of the
absolutely.
product. Like, I've seen it happen a million
Yeah.
times, right?
Oh, same. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. Even if you're a prospect, talking to CLM companies in a demo, like the questions you ask are really important. Like being really
Yes.
thoughtful about those
Mhm.
questions and letting them know. I mean, I'm going to say use case 100 times in this conversation, but letting them know your use case and why you think the tool would or would not work for you. They'll keep those conversations close to their chest. They'll
They
put
will.
them, into consideration for product
Mhm.
development purposes. So, and sometimes if they're a newer tech company, there's something to be said for partnering at like an early adoption kind of level, just to
Yes.
say like, you may not have customers like me, but can you build it out for me? Like, how do we
Yeah.
make that happen?
Yeah.
It's certainly worth just. It doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to be honest about what you need and
Yeah.
how you think they fit.
I have found, maybe you've run across this too, especially in your role when you're getting customer feedback.
Mhm.
There's a philosophy about not sharing too much information when you're in the prospecting stages, when you're looking at
Yeah.
CLM vendors, when you're thinking about what you're going to purchase. And I would encourage almost the exact opposite, which would be
Same.
share as much as you can, because that allows the CLM vendor and the partner to price things effectively, for you.
Mhm.
And then also to make sure that they are the right fit. because
Absolutely.
you don't want to not share the fact that you're a complete G Suite shop. You never use Microsoft a day in your life and nobody at your company likes
Mhm.
it. And you're talking to vendors and that never came up. And now you're stuck with a product that your teams can't use. Like you have to, I think
Yeah,
you have to be vocal. And I think I advocate for transparency all the time because it's only helpful to
absolutely.
everyone involved. Right.
Oh, 100%. And I think across the board, it matters. Like from the fit perspective, the provider can be able to say like, look, we can't do that today, but we think we can in the future
Right.
with these things. Or they may be able to say like, I'm going to be honest with you, you guys are not the right customer for us.
Right.
Maybe they introduce you to somebody else. Like it can only help, right?
Yeah.
But from the pricing standpoint, you mentioned pricing. I think that's so important. I've heard of situations just in legal ops discussions I've had and talking with different friends and peers that there's such an interesting tension that comes up if it's not super clear at the early stages when you enter into the order form exactly what you're doing and exactly what you're going to pay for, because
Yeah.
inevitably it will come up in the future like, okay, you asked for this workflow or you asked for this additional capability, we have to charge you for that.
Right.
Or maybe you put the provider in a situation where they're like, okay, well, we need to charge you for it, but at this stage in the game maybe we won't. It just kind of creates some tension in the relationship. So
It does.
you obviously you can't know everything especially if you're new to CLM, you can't know everything at the first, conversation of what you
Mm.
might need, but even just being really clear about what you think you need and
Yeah.
what the kind of implementation might look like is going to save everybody some headache in the long run.
So much headache. Like a rule of thumb for me when I'm creating a proposal for a customer, which is like I'm helping to design what they're going to buy with the CLM vendor and
Hmm.
what the services are going to be. When
Right.
my list of assumptions that I've had to use is 3 or 4 slides long because I don't have the information that I need from the customer, either because they don't know it yet, or it's an RFP
Hmm.
situation, or they're not comfortable sharing it, or they think it's going to be, a conflict, or they just don't know.
Sure.
I always cringe at that because I'm a professional enough to make certain assumptions, right? And just as you
Yeah,
are, I'm sure.
sure.
But at the
Hmm.
same time, wouldn't it be better if I didn't have to? Like, let's just have a
Yeah,
transparent conversation about what your needs are and what you can afford and what your budget is. And I know that's always like folks want to protect that. And I think the main reason folks want to
sure.
protect it is because if you tell a vendor your budget is $5, the cost that's going to come back is 501. That's the concern, right?
Mm,
But I think in
sure.
reality, like us folks that are practitioners, we don't want to charge you $5 and you get my analogy. Like we want to give you the best
Yeah, of
solution.
course.
That's the goal,
Right.
right? The best solution is the
Yeah,
goal. So transparency is
absolutely.
always important for that reason, in my opinion. So
Absolutely.
so you were so moving back into your career as
Yes.
we keep weaving through your
Yeah.
journey,
Right.
which
Spent
is
45 minutes on my
no,
career. My bad.
that's great because I think each phase kind of
So
you
much
build,
learning.
right? You build.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so you were at Contract Pod AI and you were
Mhm.
loving what you were doing there. And then
Yep.
you decided to become a mommy, right? And so isn't
Yeah.
that's your what that was your next career move, right? As full-time mom.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah, I spent some time just being a full-time mom, which was really nice.
Yeah.
And now I'm consulting. Honestly, like I look at this, I'm I'm a very optimistic person. I think life is so beautiful. Like everything works out the way it's supposed
It
to.
does.
I have had such incredible opportunities at every stage of my career from brilliant people who have taken a chance on me, and I couldn't be more grateful for all of that. And to be at this place now where like I've built enough expertise and knowledge in this industry to be a consultant. And I work with a couple of different legal tech companies,
Hmm.
and I'm able to do that right now part time to
Yeah.
be with my daughter as much as possible. But that's just the best feeling. Like I get
Yeah,
to
I
work
love
on
that.
really cool projects. Oh my gosh, I get to work on really cool projects with really cool people, and then take my daughter to the park. So it's
Yes.
just the greatest,
I
best of
love
both
that.
worlds situation.
I love that. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's a little bit scary to take that leap, right? To go from the regular
Oh,
paycheck and the benefits
so
and the
scary.
and to just know that it's going to be okay and the time needs to be
Yeah,
spent at home with your family and that's what you need to do. And I love that you just
exactly.
were like, this is what we're doing and it's going to be
Yeah.
okay. And now you're
Well,
on
and
the sort of the other side of it, and not the other
yeah.
side because you're still obviously, in the throes of
Yeah.
motherhood, but you're balancing it,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. And well, even today I was on a call with one of my clients and I just had my daughter sitting with me. It's just really it's nice to be able to say, like, this is my capacity. I have a lot of experience and I want to help anybody I can help. People have been really receptive to that,
Yeah.
which is just the greatest surprise to me in the world. Because to your point about being scary, like it's terrifying. It's terrifying even now when I know that things are perfectly fine, but it is different. It's different than anything I've ever done. But like I just realized, and this kind of came really organically. As you know, I just reach out to people on LinkedIn. I do a lot of cold messaging because I just want to talk to people and learn
Mhm.
from them. And through some of this cold messaging, I was just like, do you have any, like, talking to different founders of legal tech companies, do you have any help you need? Like anything I can take off your plate? What do you
Mhm.
spend the majority of your time on? I can help with like we've talked about, understand legal persona. I can
Yeah.
help with communication, either sales or marketing. I can help with product development, product strategy, customer acquisition strategy, all this stuff,
Yeah.
because that's what my experience is in. And it's been great. It's been really cool to just see what people are doing and be around like-minded people who are just excited about making legal work better and faster and easier. And I'm really proud of where I am.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I'm proud of you too.
Thanks.
That's so great.
Thank you.
I
I'm
love
proud of
your
you. Like,
Aw,
please.
thank you. I love your story so much, and where you are, and something that I was thinking as you were saying you were reaching out to people just cold on LinkedIn,
Mhm.
and I've done that too.
Yeah.
And some of the conversations have been really fruitful. I'm wondering, like, is it? Do you have like a theme of feedback you're getting from folks where they need help? I'm just curious if it's like a common,
Oh,
like,
sure.
I need a lot of people are needing like this thing, or a lot of people are needing this. I just wondered if you're seeing like some sameness out in the industry of where folks are struggling.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think some people, it's about like they're early enough that they have a good idea and they don't quite know how to reach people and how to find people that would be the right fit for their product.
Hmm.
So a lot of it is that, like, a lot of founders I've talked to have been spending so much of their own time doing this research analysis, even just being able to like offload that to me.
Yeah.
Be like, Lily, can you can you do
Yes.
like 10 hours of research and come back to me with what you find? That's a big relief because that's time they can go spend on something else, including with their own family.
Right.
Um, and for some people, like I've talked to some founders who are not lawyers who just kind of want to understand from the legal perspective if they're approaching things in the right way,
Hmm.
or because they're kind of they're a legal service provider that like is legal-esque
Yeah.
services, right? They're not necessarily providing legal support, but it's close enough.
Hmm.
And then some who are just like really, really close to their own product that want to just get some additional feedback and say,
Oh
like,
yeah.
I have spent years building this and I'm proud of it and I believe in it, but I need other people to give me perspective
Right.
on what I may be missing.
Yeah. I think that's
Those are
so
my favorite
important. Yeah.
those are my favorite conversations because to be receptive to that feedback already to me makes you like steps above so
Yep.
many other people as a founder. But to just kind of like, I always liken it. Everything's so emotional. I think in business, a lot of times people like take emotion out of it. I'm an emotional person. Here it is. Take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Um, and for them to be able to like open their product up to somebody they don't really know, like me, and
Hmm.
just say, what do you think? Is so scary.
It's so
It's so
scary.
scary.
It's so
Oh my
scary.
gosh.
Because
And,
they've like poured themselves into
exactly.
creating this thing. I know because I've done some I've sat in on some early stage just discussions around
Mhm.
building product, and it's so scary, and I've been
Yeah,
so appreciative when folks would be comfortable enough to share that with me and get my feedback. Like that's a big deal.
absolutely. It
Yeah.
really is. And to your point about, we talked a little bit earlier about feedback. That's one of the things I say to founders all the time is that when you're soliciting feedback, you have to be really, really careful not to say, do you like it? Yes or no? Or
Yeah.
like, what do you wish it did? Because while those are important questions, if you're not narrowing the focus of the feedback that you're getting, you may have a really, really cool tool that serves one purpose that they say would be awesome if it was also a CLM, or would be
Right.
awesome if it's if it was also document automation in some way.
Yes.
And sure it would, but if that's not what you're trying to accomplish, then the feedback loses a lot of its value, and it can make you lose your kind of lose your way as a founder
Yeah.
if you're not careful.
Yeah, I would agree with
So
you.
so yeah, a lot of those I know that's kind of a long-winded way to answer your question, but it's just been a lot of really fascinating conversations to help make people's products better and then reach the right kind of target markets.
That's amazing. What are your favorite projects to work on these days?
I think it's honestly a lot of the product development stuff is really cool to me,
Yeah.
because I'm seeing different sides. I'm seeing some CLM, I'm seeing some like document automation and AI and things like that. So I'm touching a lot of different pieces of different things. And just to really think through, like as a user of legal tech myself, and as my in my past life, all of the things I've done, just thinking like what would actually be helpful to me or what would
Right.
actually be helpful to my team.
Mhm.
It's really an interesting exercise to go through.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I always bring that perspective of a end user as someone
Hmm.
that did the job to every
Yeah.
single conversation I have, because I know how painful it is to have to be in 4 different tools to get the information that I need for a contract.
Yeah.
And I know how painful
Exactly.
it is to have to search my email for the last comment somebody made on a red line. Like, am I in the
Hmm.
right version? Am I not in the right version? Like, what was the last?
Right.
Like, there's so many pieces to it, right? And so, I always think of it from that perspective too, as a user, and like, how is this going to help make the
Yeah.
job easier, and how can it automate? What can it automate? Where can we look at ways to make my daily life more joyful when I'm using
Yeah.
technology?
Exactly, because that's
Yeah,
what it should be used for.
right.
And,
Yeah.
talking about pains and make your life more joyful, one of the things you and I connected on was the fact that, like, where we started. So, my first job in legal at all was an internship when I was 18.
Hmm.
I thought I might want to be a lawyer, but I didn't have any exposure to any lawyers that I could really talk to about it.
Hmm.
So I, it's kind of aging myself here, but I went through and I wrote letters to 100 lawyers in my local area, and I
Hmm.
mailed them out and was just like, "Can I talk to you? Can I get coffee with you? Can I shadow you? I just want to learn from somebody in this space." And there was one super kind man who responded to me and said, like, "Do you want an internship this summer at my law firm?" Um,
Of
which just
course.
like changed, yeah, exactly, just changed the course of my life professionally in
Hmm.
so many ways. But at the firm, they primarily worked in employment law, but they had so much information on employment contracts at the firm. When somebody needed a contract, they would send little old 18-year-old me
Hmm.
into this set of 3 rooms in the back where contracts were stuck, like stacked in boxes to the ceiling to
Yes.
access anything. And they were alphabetized, but people make mistakes, so
Of
things were missing, and it
course.
would sometimes take hours to find things.
Yep.
I got bit by a spider in that room, in one of
Oh
those
my
rooms. Like,
gosh.
I do not, there was so much trauma there, but I really think that was the start of my like really innovation driven mind,
Yeah.
because I just went there. I was able to convince this team of partners and say, like, we gotta put these into some sort of digital format. Like, it's not that hard to do.
Do you know what
And
I
just save
wonder?
you so much time.
I should do a poll on LinkedIn of how many people in CLM or legal ops careers
Mhm.
started in a room full of banker's boxes, because that is
Yes,
where
yes.
so many of us have come to CLM to
Hmm.
just be like, this is not okay. This
Like,
is
guys,
not
this
okay.
is terrible. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But
Yeah.
if you like, most people just don't really have the time to make these big changes,
Hmm.
so they just don't, right? It's
They
like
just
easy
don't.
enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, and you see that now, like most people are out of bankers boxes, I hope.
Right.
But you see that now with things like, shared drives. Maybe they're not even in SharePoint as an
Right.
example, because SharePoint's just something people use a lot of. And that's where readiness comes in, right? Is we talked about documenting processes and just having a consistent way of doing things. Like, you do not have to be advanced, you don't have to be mature in your contract management, but even just saving things in a folder and making sure that everybody's saving things in the right way.
Right.
And even like the naming convention of the contract, it lets you search on things, it lets you um, share the right kind of information with everybody who needs to access it. Like, it'll just take your team to a whole different level. And that's why I talk all the time with people, like, you don't, as much as CLMs are great, like, you don't always need a CLM.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not ready for whatever reason, but
Right.
that doesn't mean you don't need a process to
Yeah.
make yourself understand what's in your contracts anyway.
No, I agree. That is such good advice. So I think that kind of coming full circle to the readiness discussion, maybe
Yeah.
CLM is not what you need right now. Maybe what you
Right.
need right now is just to get consistent in some really key areas like naming convention, where things are
Hmm.
stored, how you number documents, or how the parent child relationship works. Or there's a
Hmm.
handful of things that can really take your contracting game to the next level. And maybe you're not ready for
Absolutely.
CLM, or maybe your department's small, or you don't have budget this year, or you're dealing with, the
Hmm.
economic tough times that many of the businesses are these days. And you're like, we just need it to be easier. We don't need it to
Yeah.
be a full blown CLM implementation. Like, those are some key things that you can work on to make
Hmm.
everyone's life easier. And then you're so much more ready when budget comes around again, and you can look at CLM seriously
Yeah.
and, spend the money. Then you can help yourself tremendously in the interim by just doing those few things that just make the
Hmm.
manualness um, easier to palate. Right.
Absolutely. I mean, even, I know that there's some headache, obviously, for people if, say, a contract gets signed, you upload it. I'm going to use SharePoint as the example. You
Mhm.
upload it into a SharePoint, and, if you have to go in and click into the few columns you have to say, this is the start date, this is the, termination notice period, this is the, termination date before it automatically renews. It can be a few minutes of your time, but
Yeah.
think of how helpful that is, right? To
It's so
have that
helpful.
information easily visible. I think it's just amazing. Like you said, it really does take your contracting game to the next level. And I've talked to so many people that are just like, oh, well, I'm kind of embarrassed. We don't really have, we don't have a CLM, we don't have a big process. Like we just have folders in SharePoint or something. It's like, that's amazing. You should be
Right?
so proud. It takes so much work to get there. So like nobody
Yes.
should ever feel like down about themselves as they're building processes and trying to make things a little better. Like there's always a good, better, best situation
Of
for everybody,
course. Of
right?
course. Of
Um,
course. And baby
and
steps
like we
are okay.
said,
Right?
absolutely. Like we said, CLM providers are going to thank you and you're going to thank yourself for any efforts that you've put in to establish your process, outline information that is critical to you to capture from your contracts, outline workflows, approval matrices, things like that.
Yep.
You're going to save everybody a ton of time and just make the process of transition so much easier.
True. And on a last and important point, you're going to make your
Mhm.
CLM implementation costs and professional services
So
uh,
much lower.
so much lower. Such a
Yeah.
huge reduction if we don't need to spend hours with you on the phone digging through those kinds of things. Like, horror story is, I remember spending 2 weeks and I don't even know how many hours of my life talking through naming conventions with a customer, because everybody was just
Oh,
naming things their own
goodness.
way, because there were so many different attorneys. And so things like that, or
Mhm.
even like naming convention and just the templates, like, attorneys love words, right? And so when I talk to
Yeah, sure.
organizations, I find a lot of them, I like my MSA because I crafted it and it's beautiful and I love all the language. And then
Mhm.
the same attorney at the same organization, I like my MSA because it's crafted and I did it and it's beautiful. But taking
Yeah.
the best parts of all of those MSAs and making one template
Mhm.
version, and using that playbook that we talked about to, sort of
Yeah,
line out clauses, that's a massive step towards CLM implementation if you can tackle that kind of stuff,
absolutely.
and it just
Absolutely.
takes a little time. It's not terribly hard. It's just pulling together the documents rather than paying a professional services team to do it. And of course,
Yeah.
you can do that. You can pay a consultant or you can pay a team to help you if you just don't have time. We get that. But if you
Yeah.
if budget is the concern, spend the time, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And the time, it doesn't have to be a massive project over the course of a few months to just
Mhm.
rush and get it done. If it takes you years, it takes you years. Like, I don't mean to be,
Yeah.
to make anyone sad by that, amount of time. But if you think about it from the perspective of what's going to be most helpful to me and my team, and what should be an immediate priority that will
Mhm.
have an ability to show value right away.
Right.
And like naming convention is a great one because the ability to search on it and have the right kind of parameters. If you have party name and date in there, like, oh my gosh, the number of times I have seen people save things and call it contract and that's it.
Right. Right,
Just
or they name
not
it the name
okay.
of their company, like,
Hmm.
the CLMRX MSA. Well, of course I know it's
Right.
the CLMRX because it's my
Right.
MSA. Like,
It
what's the
should be.
customer's name, right? Anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
things like that to
exactly.
consider. Well, this has
Exactly.
been so much fun, and I know we
Yeah.
started to say what your background was, but I love, like, the thing that I
Mhm.
love the most about this podcast are hearing people's career journey, because
Yeah.
it's such a the experience that you have in legal ops and in CLM, it compounds, as you're rolling through each
Yeah,
one of your sort of career progression, you experience a different thing around CLM, and it just adds to your knowledge and it adds to your ability to help customers. So I loved that
absolutely.
we took the long way around your career because we talked about all these
Me
great
too.
little nuggets of learning and experience that you had along the
Yeah.
way. So this was so much fun. I'm really excited for everyone to hear the podcast and give us their feedback.
Oh,
But
thanks.
I'm also
Yeah.
excited to see what's next for you in your consulting journey. Like, where are you going to head
Yeah.
next, and what kind of fun projects you're going to do?
Thanks. I will keep you posted for sure. Yeah, I think just as a note, for anyone listening in that's interested in this kind of CLM readiness or just talking about a good starting point, I will be on a webinar on June 6th from 12 to 1 Eastern with the team at Zuva,
Mm-hmm.
ZUVA. They're a contracts AI company, and they're talking about it's really going to be a fun debate about SharePoint,
Oh,
right? So,
debate! Yay!
yeah, I'm excited. We've got Colin Levy, Jerry Levine on the anti-SharePoint side, and
Nice.
we've got Lara Trope from InnoLaw on the pro
Oh,
SharePoint side.
perfect.
So it's going to be so much fun to just kind of play around and go back and forth. But the reality of the conversation is some people are super pro SharePoint, some people are super pro CLM, some people fall in the middle. And at the end of the day, like wherever you can fall to just kind of improve your process in any way,
Yep.
super supportive of that.
Yeah, I love
do
that.
do what makes you happy.
I love
Help
that.
your organization.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
yeah, there will be more information. I'll post about it on LinkedIn. You'll see it on Zuba's LinkedIn too, but would love to have people listen into that and give us feedback on that too. It'd
Yeah,
be
that'll
really
be
fun.
great. Really great folks that you have. The Innova team is
Oh my
amazing.
gosh.
Colin's great. Like,
Amazing.
really great folks. So I'll have to listen into that one too. And of course, I'm going to self plug in my give
Mhm.
myself a plug for my book. In chapter 2, I talk about readiness. So
Love
um
it.
lots of great
Great
resources
topic.
out there for you, right, to get ready. And thank you so much, Lily. This was so much fun. I
Yeah.
really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm so excited to watch your career journey from here. And let's stay in touch.
Thanks. Absolutely. So excited to listen to more podcast episodes. So
Yeah.
grateful you had me. And if anybody ever wants to talk CLM readiness or their experience, my experience, like please reach out anytime. It's the best part about being in this community is everybody is so open
Right.
and just so supportive. And I'd love to chat with anybody and everybody.
Wonderful.
So thanks so much for having me on.
Yes, thank you, Lily. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. So much fun.